Perfect. So welcome back to another episode of the BioHub. Today we are really excited to welcome Daniel Couto, Chief Operating Officer of Vedanta Biosciences. Daniel brings nearly 30 years of experience in biopharmaceutical development and manufacturing, with a background that spans both large pharma companies and innovative biotech firms. Before joining Vedanta, Daniel served in senior roles at companies such as ContraFect, Merck Sharp, and Nuvelo Inc, contributing to the advancements of numerous drug candidates and therapeutic modalities. At Vedanta, Daniel is at the forefront of pioneering microbiome-based therapeutics and his extensive knowledge in operations management. So in this episode, we'll be taking a dive into Daniel's journey, the exciting development that's at Vedanta, and the unique culture he has built. So welcome to the show, Daniel. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Well, obviously, just to kind of go straight in, as mentioned there in the introduction, you've got such an extensive background in both large pharmaceutical and small biotech companies. Can you share some of the key differences that you found working in the big pharma and small biotech, and what personalities thrive and what have you found that kind of works best there?
Right. Yeah. Obviously, both big pharma and smaller biotechs are trying to accomplish the same thing. We have the same regulatory requirements and clinical requirements to develop drugs. The difference between the two, one of the major ones is pretty obvious. It's resourcing, whether it's money or people or infrastructure. And so that puts smaller biotechs at a point or an environment where they have to try to be a little bit more creative with how they get stuff done.
Yeah.
And what I find in smaller biotechs is you are constantly trying to solve problems and pivot and adjust based off the things that you are encountering, right? And that causes the type of people that you need to bring to it to be comfortable with change and comfortable with coming together quickly and trying to work in a group to solve a problem, and comfortable in communicating constantly cross-functionally. Those aren't unique specifically to biotech. I mean, you also could do that in pharma, but I think you have to do it more often and more frequently in a smaller company in order to keep moving forward. With a larger pharma company, you have less broad of a role. You're a little bit more narrow and siloed, but you have more depth into that specific silo. And therefore, for that point of view, the skill sets that I found you need to really have is to be able to, get more buy-in from stakeholders across different functions, or to be able to communicate cross-functionally better, to have systems in place in order to do that, so that decision-making can be as fast as you can. Whereas in small biotech, obviously you can just go down the hall, get the three people that are the decision makers together, make a decision and go. So that's the nice nimbleness of small biotech, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think something that a lot of people from the smaller biotech say is because obviously it's such a small company, they do tend to need to wear a number of different hats in an organization.
Sure.
So compared to obviously, as you mentioned there, their role in a big pharma is definitely not as broad as, let's say, in those smaller biotech companies. So that totally makes sense. And obviously, you've played your part at both. So what actually inspired you to join Vedanta, and what sets Vedanta apart from other biotech companies in the microbiome space?
Yeah, sure. So Vedanta is unique amongst the biotech companies in the microbiome space because what we're doing and what we've been doing from day one, which was circa 10, 12 years ago, was developing defined bacterial consortia. And I need to kind of explain that because some of the other things that we'll probably cover going forward will base off of this. The microbiome field utilizes live bacteria in order to colonize, in our case, the gut, and then affect the body in different ways, whether it's to outcompete pathogens for infectious disease, or to colonize and make metabolites that then trigger immune response in the body, or other things like that, right? And so historically, the early companies that were in the field were using fecal transplantation or fecal-based products to do this, right? And there are two that are approved now. Rebiota is a Ferring product, and Voust, which is developed by Seres. And those products are donor-derived, which means they take fecal donations. They either prep them or process them or fractionate them in a way, and then that's their product. They put them into a format to be either taken as an enema in Rebiota's case, or in a capsule form for Voust. Mm-hmm. And they work well, but the problem with that is you are tied to a natural source, whereas our product is a defined bacterial consortium, which means our lead product in VE303 for the same indications that these are for recurrent C. difficile infections. Those are made up of 8 specific bacteria that have master cell banks that are the origin of the manufacture for it, or working cell banks as you get more into late phase. But they come from a clonal cell bank. And that means that we can use the technologies that have been around for recombinants to scale it up in fermentation, as opposed to needing a natural source, and be able to manufacture that way. And that's what we've done. So going back to your question, what attracted me to Vedanta? Back in 2016, the contract manufacturing organizations that are around to be able to do this type of thing did not exist. Mm-hmm. And it put a different type of pressure on the company, which made it unique. We had to build internally our own capabilities. And as a preclinical company at the time, and then an early clinical company, that's unique because most companies don't do that. So from a CMC point of view, the challenge of being able to come into a small company and have to build out a full GMP organization, a full manufacturing capability, the technology, all the support functions, everything like you would in a large company, but you get the fun, flexible, adrenaline rush, so to speak, from a small biotech startup. That was what attracted me. That, and to be honest, the CEO. Mm-hmm. Bernat is the CEO of the company, and he was a first-time CEO for this company, right? And that was a little bit scary, but when I met the guy, there were a lot of things about him that said, okay, yeah, I think I can definitely partner and work with this guy. He could have been so many different things. He could have been arrogant, but he wasn't. Mm-hmm. He could have been micromanager, but he wasn't. He could have been very narrow and very much, focused on research, which he is, but he was an eternal student. So he wanted to bring in people. He wanted to listen to them. He wanted to learn from them. And he knew that he didn't know everything. And that's what made this symbiotic relationship that we have, and how we see eye to eye on a lot of things, make it work really well. So yeah, that's what attracted me to the company.
Yeah, no, and amazing. And I think working for someone that, really does listen and takes the time to listen and, kind of cultivates that culture within, also explains not only the science that you guys are doing, but also explains why you've been there for quite a period of time now. I think nearly 8 years or 8 years. And I guess on the flip side of that, that itself being, one of the kind of first in the market, can really change the landscape, providing that you have positive data. but have you faced any challenges? So what challenges have Vedanta faced in developing these microbiome-based therapies, and how as a team have you overcome them?
Yeah. It's a good question. The nature of the product, and that's why I kind of went into it in the early part. Our products are made up of not just defined bacterial consortia, but it's a consortia, which means there's multiple bacteria in our product. Our lead product, 303, has 8 bacteria. Our IBD, or our ulcerative colitis product, that has 16 bacteria. And so the way that we were manufacturing those are as individual drug substances, as individual strains, and then combining them to be able to produce a drug product after they've been released. So in doing that, what it does is it puts a burden from a process development point of view of having high throughput development. Right? You're not developing an antibody. You're not developing a protein or an enzyme. One, you're developing 8 of them. Or you're developing 16 of them.
Oh wow!
And so therefore, in both process development and research, screening, discovery, it puts a high throughput kind of a need for both data and analysis there. I think that the other area that's been a challenge, and this is not just for us, this is a field across the whole field. It's just that we're one of the leaders, and therefore we're dealing with it from a both a regulatory point of view and the technology point of view, is analytics, being able to quickly turn around, the potency of strains. Viability equals potency for our field, as defined in the regulatory guidance documents, and therefore being able to quickly turn around both potency and identification, that poses a challenge in later phase. Early phase, you can mostly rely on technology that's been around for a long time. People have been plating bacteria. You can plate bacteria. That's great. You can count them, and you can ID them through, qPCR or 16S or some other sequencing, right? But when you get to later phase and you mix things together as 8 things mixed together, it makes it much harder to be able to find out the potency of a specific bacteria as a mixture, and a identification of a specific bacteria that's very similar to some other bacteria that's in that mixture. So we've, for the last 3 or 4 years, been heavy into developing analytics that are very unique to be able to solve these types of problems.
Amazing. And I guess as a team, that's definitely, been challenging, but obviously coming together, working collaboratively, I'm assuming quite cross-functionally as well. It kind of leads back to, the culture that you've built at Vedanta, based on previous experiences that you've had, obviously working with your CEO on that. What would you say have been some of the key elements of Vedanta's culture, and how have they influenced your team building and hiring practices to face the challenges that you faced and also have the successes that you're having?
Yeah. Well, it's always fun to enter into a startup kind of situation and have a blank canvas, right, to be able to create from, right? And again, it was extremely helpful and enjoyable to be able to have a partner in my boss, to be able to do that, and so that we're all on the same page of what kind of company you want to create and the type of culture you want to have. But in general, I think one of the key things that we both agreed on early on is that the key to all of these things are going to be people, right? The people that we choose is going to be so important. And the kinds of people, the phenotype of person that you're trying to get in, is key. And so we spent quite a long time in trying to choose the right people. And this goes to, you don't want to do what other people do incorrectly, or what you've seen in other companies that done poorly. You want to take all the good things from your history and combine them into this new company and get rid of all the bad things, right? And advance. And so what I've noticed in a lot of hiring practices for people is, for our industry and for technical industries, people focus on the technical attributes or your technical accomplishments or things like that, because I think you can easily identify with that in an interview process. What you really need to be doing is not just that. That's like to get in the door.
Yeah.
What you really need to do is really dig into the soft skills and the things that make that person a person, that are going to be important in whether they can survive, especially in a small biotech environment, right? So what I'm talking about are things like, in an interview, you need to really try and assess whether someone has a good work ethic, or whether they're proactive, right? And whether they're a good communicator. And when I say that, it's you can do that in an interview, but it's more like communication is really mostly listening and then clearly simply speaking. So it's the listening aspect that you're trying to get to in this exchange. We're trying to assess whether people are problem solvers, and they're self-starters. So in doing that, like, I like to think about the types of questions that may not be the questions that you would ask. Like, I delve more into where people grew up, and I delve more into whether they played sports throughout their high school, for example, or into college, and what kind of sports. Are they team sports or are they individual sports, right? I delve into whether they're in their family, or they have siblings. Are they the oldest? Are they the youngest? Because there are dynamics that are set in people's in their DNA almost, right? That you're not going to teach them, that they are coming with, right? And you want to assess whether they have it or not. So those are the types of things, and it's very hard. It's not easy to do. I practice doing all this because I like to play Texas Hold'em poker. And so reading people is a skill that's really something that I think many people should try to master, right? So.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as a recruiter, I think that is so important, and it's so overlooked by quite a lot of people, that you do need to focus on. Yes, of course, technical experience is so important, but culture experience is what makes people stay. And that's how you keep your people for longer, because they're in a place where the culture works for them.
Yeah.
And
the other elements of the culture that we have here is we have a lot of fun in what we're doing. The people we have a lot of fun, right? And that's important. And we do that through, I don't know what the theme is for biotechs, but food is very important in small biotech companies. So, and you probably tell from, anyway, but food is very important. And we have a lot of fun, and it makes it so that you have this bond that is not unlike any other team that you're trying to build. So when things get rough, people come together easily and help each other, right? And there will be very tough times, and you want to be able to rely on people to do that. Having the pandemic and COVID has really put a kind of a kink in the works for the way a lot of companies operated, so they had to try and figure out how to do that. Also, I think the technology has also done the same thing. When you can do this, right?
Yeah.
Having a video conference as opposed to being in the same room, it's not the same thing. And especially when you're solving a problem, right? So there's a lot of barriers we had to overcome in being able to maintain that team that can solve problems quickly and that can pivot on a moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that does lead me quite nicely onto my next question. Obviously, the current market has been, since COVID, has been affected. It's affected a lot of biotechs. So how has the current market landscape affected Vedanta, and what strategies have you employed to navigate these challenges and overcome them?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when COVID first kind of took hold in the beginning, like the early beginning of 2020, The market actually got stimulated because there was a lot of input of money into biotech to build out quickly and to be able to handle things quickly. And so that actually brought a swell of demand for people. And when we were growing at that time too, and it was the sector was very competitive at that point to get people. There was a lot of turnover. People were jumping 1 and 2 levels in their careers quickly, and commanding higher prices because there was the demand, right? And then in 2021, towards the latter part of 21 into 22, things went the other direction, right? Yeah. And then there was a drying up of both interest, not just in the microbiome space, but in general in the market. And that made it almost opposite. It was harder to go from one company to another. Jobs weren't as abundant. There were a lot of layoffs that were happening in companies, or closures in companies, in not just microbiome sector, but in general. IPOs weren't nearly as abundant, you name it, right? And so now that brings us to the market today, which is still a hard market to raise funds for. And what we have done is we've relied on a couple of different tactics that were different than we did 5 or 10 years ago. What we had done is we started looking at, for example, high impact investors. High impact investors is a type of investor that has like a dual purpose in their fund. They have the normal traditional rationale of trying to maximize the value of the fund for their investors. And but secondly, it has this mission that's very specific to some broader cause. An example of that is AMR Action Fund, right? AMR Action Fund is around antimicrobial resistance. So they invest to make money, but they invest in companies that are aligned with that cause because it's a bigger, broader health concern that's going to be an issue that's growing and growing every single year, right? So that's an impact investor. So there are a handful of impact investors we latched onto that align with the types of things that we're doing, including the Gates Foundation, for example. Gates Foundation is very much into trying to solve developing world country issues, and microbiome-based technology for therapeutics also is in line with trying to do that for infectious diseases for developing world issues. So that's one thing. The other thing we had to try and do is to cast a broader net, right? To start looking, and this happened over the last couple of years, at areas that we hadn't had to look for investors, like the Far East, Korea, and other places in the Far East.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, something that Vedanta's received, which is obviously that substantial 114 million grant from the US government. How is this funding, especially in these times, that amount is extremely substantial and so amazing. How has this funding impacted your operations, and what are your plans for utilizing it?
So that funding was a grant from the US government through BARDA, which is a group that's a portion of Health and Human Services. And what that is for the development of our lead product for C. difficile infections. And so what we've done is we've specifically been able to offset the costs of development, which are the costs for personnel, the costs for third-party contractors, third-party testing, clinical trials, dramatically. And that's really been extremely helpful. Not to mention, I'd have to say, BARDA as an organization is a great partner. They have subject matter experts that are very helpful in reviewing a lot of the things. Obviously, with grants, you have obligations to be able to report to them. So we keep close ties and reporting progress on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis, you name it. And in doing that, we get a lot of great feedback, and we, they want us to succeed because it's good for their cause as well, right? So, BARDA has been a great partner in doing that. We also have a predecessor to BARDA is another grant series that we've gotten 2 grants for, is CARB-X. CARB-X is also partially government-based, but partially funded by other groups like the Gates Foundation and others. And they put money in a big pot, and then they put out grants to people. So the lead product prior to going into phase 2 was actually funded by CARB-X to the tune of $7 or $8 million to help us through our preclinical phase 1 portion. And now we've matriculated out of that into BARDA, so we kind of graduated, right? So, but the one of our other products that's earlier in the pipeline that's going into its early phase trials is also received a CARB-X grant to be able to help it through that. So we're propagating our pipeline through grants of different sources. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that's super impressive. I mean, to get 3 grants, I mean, some companies are lucky enough just to get 1, but to obviously have 3 is just really, really good news for you guys. So obviously fingers crossed that everything's going well with those clinical trials, and they'll obviously be happy where they've spent their money too. I think what's unique about your journey in biotech is involving both venture creation and roles in large companies. What are the most important learnings you can say that you've taken from each individual experience of the companies that you've worked at?
Yeah, for sure. So I went on vacation with my family over the past week, like you do, and we actually went to London, and then we went to Paris, right?
Oh, lovely.
And we took the kids to Westminster Abbey, like tourists would. And we were walking through Westminster, and we were just in awe, right, with all of the different amazing people that are buried at Westminster. We're walking along in the initial, and I look down and I see I'm standing on Charles Darwin, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Charles Darwin. And it made me think about what Darwin was famous for in studying evolution. And what I've noticed in my biotech career is that in order to really be effective in a smaller biotech company, you need to be able to evolve, and you need to be able to evolve quite readily. Being flexible, being able to adjust, being able to learn, being able to pivot and change is not something that everybody is fully comfortable in doing. There's plenty of people that are very comfortable in having something that is very stable and non-changing environment. And not to say that pharma is any more stable than a biotech company, because you have all kinds of changes and layoffs and whatever in big pharma too. But at least your role is a little bit more finite and more defined, and maybe more siloed, like we were talking about earlier, in a pharma company. And so to be able to understand, who you are and what you thrive at, what you're good at, is very important, not only for your success, but for your happiness.
Yeah.
If you're not in the right position or in the right company or with the right people, and you have to get up every morning and drive to your job and you're hating your job, that's not a good place to be at. And so to really be honest with yourself is very important, to know which of these kind of companies or environments that you fit into as well. You learn quite a bit from large pharma companies. Pharma companies are very good at putting systems in place, and they're very thorough in being able to systematically do things because they have the resources and the time to be able to do this. And so if you're straight out of college and you want to be able to learn how to do validation, or you want to be able to do a systematic DOE approach to development, or you want to understand how the regulatory pathway works, then that's fantastic. You get a great education, almost like a postdoc, or even after your bachelor's into your master's from a pharma company. When you get into a biotech company, it's great to take those skills, and if you have the disposition for change, then you can take that and go into a biotech and be very effective. And what I've done in my career is I've been able to kind of pivot back and forth from larger to smaller companies. But to be honest, I've been at a lot of different companies. I've been at like eight or nine companies in my career. And this company, to your point earlier, was the longest one I've been at, to be honest. And so I've learned, I've absorbed, I've moved, and then I've taken that to the next one. So now where I'm at is, by doing this, I have an arsenal of 8 or 9 different ways to solve a problem, right? Or 8 or 9 different ways to look at the way you do things. Or I remember 3 companies ago, we did it this way for blah, blah, blah. And so you have this arsenal of options that you have in your menu to be able to help move the new company along, right? So that's some of the duality of the different environments that are in pharma versus biotech.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's good that you can, hone in on experiences in the past and still be able to use them. Because although the company sizes might be different and the cultures might be different and the environments are different, there is always something that you can take from previous experiences moving forward. And you mentioned as well, people, coming out of their degrees. What advice would you give to the younger generation aspiring to enter the biotech industry, especially those that, might be facing challenges similar to you that you've experienced, or even just the ongoing market challenges at the moment?
So full disclosure, from our pre-talk, I think what you're talking about is, so I have dyslexia, and that's been something that I've been challenged with my whole life. And what it's caused me to do is to really go towards the things that I'm really good at, which were the science and math, and that's why I went into chemical engineering as a field to study in school, and to figure out different ways to accomplish the reading, the writing types of things that you need to do as an individual in industry, period, right? And so, afflicted with that, one thing I would tell people that are coming up through it is you have to really be honest with what you are good at and what you are weak at. And don't be afraid to be weak at things, because no one has everything. And what you might think about as a strategy is to surround yourself with people that are complementary to you, that can help out, so that you're a team. Back to that team, right? If you're not very good at one area, but someone else is, then you go that way. I'm not a very good completer finisher. Right? I have great ideas and I bring them to a point, but then because I'm the youngest of 6 and my attention span was shorter than before, and I just drop it, I tend to make sure that I can pass off to people that are very organized and completer finishers to be able to take that ball and keep running, right? So I surround myself with people that aren't really necessarily the same as me, but are complementary to me. The other thing I would say to people coming up is, make sure that you pick an area in a field that are able to help people and that are timeless. And I tell this to my kids. I have 3 daughters. And they're at the age that they're trying to figure out college, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do in their careers. And I say, the one reason that your mother and I went into healthcare, my wife's a nurse practitioner, and I didn't have the stomach to be on the front line of things, so I was developing therapeutics. People will always need healthcare, They'll always, and therefore there will always be a need for people to develop that. Not to mention the feeling you get when you're able to actually create something from nothing that can change a person's life or make it better or save it is just amazing. You don't have to have too many of those, but as soon as you have that, it changes the way you look at things. And so I want people that are interested in biotech to realize that it's not just a field that's scientifically exciting. It's actually something that is needed. And because it's needed, I would say to them that if you have the ability, you have also a moral obligation to be doing this, because not everybody can do what we're doing.
No.
And you need to, not for your sake, for the sake of everybody on this planet, be continuing to develop new therapeutics for disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to pick a company also that is that you like the people. You really have to make sure that the people you get along with, because again, you don't want to get up every morning and not want to go and work with these people. And when times get tough, you need to rely on them. So make sure you spend enough time to ask the question whether the people that you're going to be working with, you really get on with.
Yeah, and it's so important. Again, it comes down to that culture and the environment that you're in. If that's the right environment, your experience only gets better. And yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think the biotech space, even as a recruiter, knowing that someone that I might place in a company or anything like that, I don't have my hands in the science. I'm not scientifically trained or anything like that. But knowing that even I have that small part to play in something that could be life-changing for someone later down the line is just such an incredible feeling. And it is just one of those things that everyone in the industry has and thrives off. You've always got that kind of that patient-first mindset.
That's right.
Which shines through so many leaders that I've spoken to. It's very clear it shines through you as well. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest on it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure too. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will speak to you soon.
Great.